Hello and welcome to another episode of Insert Clickbait on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. And I'm going to be showing you today how I painted this, I'm going to say like Greek amphora style mech army. How I came up with that as an idea and what process I went through into realising that vision and how you could do the same with your own miniatures. The first thing about Mechanicum for me is that they were going to tie in with my Iron Warriors. My Iron Warriors have this very strong Greek Macedonian feel to them. I've really lent into that Olympian background that they have. And one of the things that's coming up more and more for me is this amphora style that I've started putting onto the banners and onto tanks and my Thunderhawk as well. And there will be an upcoming video that includes the Thunderhawk of how I'm going to do the amphora, or how I have done the amphora style around the front end as well as on the back. And I actually really don't like how I've how I've done the wings, and that is one of the things that will feature in this video as well. Whenever I do a project, there always are things that I don't like or would improve, and I've actually been sitting on this Thunderhawk model in this state that you can see it now for about a year and a half, because it's only just clicked in my head that the thing that I hate about it is the black stripe on the wing. Like, the orange is too bright, but that can get toned down later. It's the patchwork colours on it. So there will be a video of me fixing the Thunderhawk from now, from where it sat since before I even thought about doing this channel. So onto the models that I'm going to use for my Mechanicum. I already had some Castellax, so I'm actually going to be using the Solwyte Studios models that you can see coming up on screen now. Like, these are really lovely models that I've been following along with for quite a bit, and I didn't think that my current printer could do justice to them. It's great for terrain, it's great for, say, a horde army like the Solar are, but something with a lot fewer model count where you might have more cause to pick up each individual model, that needs to be on a better printer. So I contacted Laserforge Miniatures, which are in Cleveland's, and they're actually going to print me out some models. So that is going to be part of this, is how I got hold of them. All the models that I'm going to be including in this 3,500 point force, I'm not including the Castellax that I'd already painted. The Games Workshop Secutari hoplites. Now, I've had these for ages. As you can see, they painted purple because I was going to paint them purple at some point when I didn't really know what I was doing with them. And I really like, obviously, the hoplite theme of them, but I couldn't take them in version 1. I've had them since they came out. Didn't take them in version 1 because they were just too good and they needed a termite, and I really wanted to walk across the board with them. And I can do that now. They're great. They're great for walking across the board, being a bodyguard for my Iron Warriors or my Archmagos. So we could be going through them and just basically using them of how we can pick up that Greek style that I've wanted in all of these. Now, the final couple of models from Solwyte that we're going to be seeing are actually amazing, and that's the Cathylos Tyrants. And these are some really cool, like, War of the Worlds looking Kraken models almost. But I think they look really good for, like, some sort of creatures of legend, a myth, Kraken of Poseidon, things like that. And I think it really goes nicely with the theme. So I got in contact with Laserforged and I headed on up to Cleveland's because it's only actually about an hour's drive from me. So it's actually a really nice shop on the seafront, really friendly owner. Like, he gave me a load of advice on the 3D prints before I got them, because I had access to the Hastati that Solwyte had done, but just for the sizes and things like that, because he's printed them out before, he's definitely worth having a conversation if you want something 3D printing to find out exactly how they're going to turn out, because they have seen the people that are printing these models for you have seen these models before, and it actually I sort of ignored him and was like, no, they'll be fine, like they're going to be great for Castellax, brilliant. And he was like, I'm not sure, they like in their current size they are a bit small. And I got them back and they ended up being a bit small. So I'd say definitely bow to the experts, because I did not. And it really bit me in the arse. So that's how I ended up with a Myrmidon cult. I'm sorry everyone that I play with a Myrmidon cult. But it's a brilliant little shop with great tables, and I definitely recommend anyone in the area going checking it out. The links for Solwyte and Laserforge will be in the description below, and anyone that wants to buy anything off Laserforged, there is a discount code that you can locate in the Patreon Discord if you join the Patreon. So if you're making an order there, just by signing up to the Patreon, you can get your order cheaper by 10%. So getting into the actual painting of the models, we're going to start with the obvious, some Vallejo black undercoat. And I used to really hate this stuff because it would always clog and things like that, but I actually, since getting a 3D printer of my own, the filters that come with a 3D printer, even if you don't have one, buy some filters and filter the the undercoat through into your airbrush so it doesn't clog, and it actually is then just perfect and saves you so much money on undercoating. Now I've put Matty's Best, and that's because I think I actually used gloss for this because that was just what they had in the store when I went, and I've got to say it doesn't massively make a difference. It does a little bit, but not massively. Nothing that you can't deal with make a difference. So get the undercoat on, and we'll skip to a more interesting bit, because let's not just spend an hour talking about this. Into the pre-shades. Now this, I would say, is possibly the most important bit, and it's essentially just going to be setting up the tones of the colour that you select for your model. So what I'm going to do here is keep my brush fairly static and turn the model so that the cone that's projected from the airbrush of paint will pick up edges. And I do this fairly roughly, like this is a bit of a speed paint of an army, and I think the more time you spend on this step, actually the better. Essentially you'll work your way around the model and pick up the top of the model in as being more and more white, and then phase down through grey to black where there is more shadow. That can then be improved upon if you can be asked brush painting by using a paintbrush to pick out edges, to deepen the shadows and things like that. Now it's not just hard armour that can be used with a pre-shade. Through sort of careful angling in the model, I find it really good for capes, especially how Games Workshop sculpts them, and also pretty much anything with an undulating form or even a smooth curved form can be pre-shaded. So that's pretty much anything, right? And if it's a big flat panel, even better, because it's quite easy to get a gradient across that. So what am I even saying? Everything is better with a pre-shade, and I'm just going to set that up on the entire army as I go through. Now this is my general, so I'm taking a bit more care with it, and I maybe get a bit too heavy on the body, which would later cause me to have to go back in with some of the main colour with a brush. Now I don't see that as too much of a problem, especially because it's my general, but I am focusing, as you can see right now, on the edges of the armour plates to try and pick out that as a clear white line on the folds of the cloak, and I'm just going to repeat that on every model to try and get these the most amount of gradients that I can across the model. And you can do this in two ways. You can go always going from lightest to darkest at the top of the model in a more realistic sense, or you can try and meet light to dark that's right next to a light area and to dark again. And that will give you really big contrasts in the model. That looks really nice, but it's just not particularly my style. I prefer, I'd say, a more realistic style, but this is painting, it's painting mechanical men and women, so I don't think we can cling to that too much. But I'm just going to start speeding through these now. I do think this is a more... Now, there are some bits that I'm not really arsed with a pre-shade on, and that's really the metallic bits and the bits that I'm then going to pick out with another colour using a brush. Because I tend to find that once I put a brush on there, unless I'm glazing, I just completely ruin the pre-shade. Now, you can do it, I have done it before, like pre-shading and then glazing over the pre-shade with a brush, but it just takes too long, and I wanted to get these done really fast. And that's one of these things. Like, as I say, you can pick out some extra highlights with a brush in the pre-shade, but I've been averaging about 2 days free time to paint once I've done all like channel things and stuff. So I just need to get things knocked out so that I can actually enjoy gaming as well as painting, because I do enjoy painting. It's just like I've got commitments as well. And that's my tip, my nib getting dry on the pen, on the airbrush, sorry, not the pen. And that is, like with the Tamiya flat white, I have been putting Fluo improver from Vallejo in. That does help a lot. I don't find it like knackers the Tamiya paint just by putting the Fluo improver in. But yeah, it does help a lot. I still get a bit of clogging, but that's just any white paint that I've ever tried. Any that I've been recommended that don't clog have always clogged. So I just tend to not worry about it now and wipe it with a cotton bud. One thing that I'm also trying to do, and as we get to the Secretary Hoplite, you'll see me do it, is just try and pick out the core areas of the model to be a bit brighter. And that's like the shoulders, the face, anything that's going to be really looked at. I'm just going to make that slight bit brighter just to draw attention to those key features. And they sort of like the golden triangle of a Space Marine, right? Is the head, the shoulders, and it meets in the middle, and that's the the golden triangle of a Space Marine. And that's where you want to pick out the most light across your models in pretty much anything you're painting. Right, so here comes the bit that like, this is the part that you really start making the army your own, is the actual colour you're going to base coat your army, right? I chose Scale 75's Kalahari Orange, and it's one that I'm really favouring now. It's on my Thunderhawk, it's on banners, all stuff like this. And I've basically just tried to match as closely as possible to historical inspiration. And I add a little bit there of Pro Acryl Mahogany, I believe. Now, I won't worry if you're trying to replicate this scheme, I won't worry too much about that. I'd just stick with Kalahari Orange. It turned out probably slightly too dark, so that's an immediate learning point from this, is don't add that. But my my feelings now is pretty much always just press on, because I obviously didn't realise at this point, adding it, that it would be too dark. Now, what you want in these pre-shades is a really, really thin coating to put over your model. You want it like pretty much translucent, so that you can have the gradient of the pre-shade shown through in your next, on your next coats, as we'll see in a second, as we go into the, I believe it's the car thing. So how I decided on this colour scheme is I wanted to really highlight the Greek theme of the army. Now, that's something that Mechanicum already embody a little, especially like transfer sheets of AdMech in 40k. They're sort of like the Greek savants compared to the Romans of the legions, right? And I just wanted to lean into that a bit more, especially with the Iron Warriors' like sort of Olympian heritage, as well as my own personal forces backstory that hopefully I will start displaying more on the channel as we kick off a campaign with this mech actually. And as you can see, I'm putting, that's the first coat gone on, and you almost can't see anything. Now the second coat, after drying it with a hairdryer, is a bit more tinged, and it has a bit of a nice dark effect on the bottom sides of the gradients, but it still needs more colour there. So I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times and maybe speed up this video. But in your own forces, one thing that I would definitely recommend is having a look at images that inspire you, your legion, what historical examples like Byzantine Empire that could be used for Ultramarines that I've seen recently, especially with Suzerain Varangian Guard, that fits perfectly. Obviously Mongols for White Scars, even Japanese for White Scars, if you want to do some sort of Pan-Asian White Scars. But anything like that, historical examples are great, because historically people had all sorts of colours all over them, and all sorts of colours such as this terracotta that I'm putting on here in their artworks and things like that, and just try and pick and choose your own colour schemes from historical examples, or even throwing stuff together, you know, like it's just an army. If you want to do an experiment of something, throw it on there, because it's not, is it really, it's not, no one's going to get hurt by you just throwing whatever colour you want on there, especially on these secondary armies. I mean, Marines have a bit more close to the bone colour schemes because it's like a future history in the legions, but outside of that, Black Shield, stuff like that, I mean, the world is your absolute oyster. Saying that, one definite thing you could do is have a look at the historical schemes that previous Marines had. I've seen more and more people nowadays painting their rhinos camo and things like that, based on the Rogue Trader era Space Marine rhinos. You've got tiger print camo patterns. You can use that in recon companies. And actually there are a lot of fitting ways to really personalise your own force through looking, as I say, historical examples of Games Workshop's previous art. The Visions of Heresy is really good, as well as Horus Heresy Legion's card game is amazing for artwork. Next up, you're going to see me put down Vallejo Dark Aluminium, and I did the same sort of step on my Solar, and that's to blast all the metals on with an airbrush, because guess what, that's about 3 times as fast, if not more, to just whack everything on there. And with such large amounts of metal on each model, I just really wanted it to get it on. So this is one of the real time saving steps. If you splash onto the model, I'd recommend weathering that area of the model just with your sponge a little bit more in a future step. It doesn't really make that much difference, especially if you're following this sort of method of doing your army, where it's going to be dirtier, it's going to look more battered, and you are going to have that weathering on there anyway. So there's just nothing wrong with choosing these faster steps, even if it's not the super popular method of doing things. Now the next step is transfers, and this isn't something that I did with my Solar, so I thought I'd show it a bit more in depth in this Mechanicum army, because I think it really highlighted the Greek theme in how I did them. So I print my own transfers quite a lot of the time just to get that like a custom feel to the models. I personally use a laser jet printer, not an inkjet printer. I much prefer just how I've tried both, and I prefer how the transfers come out. I find it's going to be funny because the 6-wheeled artillery car had a really thick transfer on, and I think I didn't test out the paper batch before using it, but it was just a bad batch off a place that I just bought them off Amazon. Always buy the same one. Can't remember which one, but you just get a random one off Amazon, print it out in your laserjet printer, and I use a Canon iSensis to print that out. I just looked over there, and yes, I use Microset to fiddle about with transfers, and then Microsol when they're on. think it's pretty standard stuff, but the way that you use the transfers, I think, is key to setting up the feel of a model. So I've done sort of an inverted amphora theme on this, like with the orange being the main body and outside the borders, and then the borders are sort of like middle of the model here. I'm then going to add numbers down the spine, the central spine of that Tyrant from Solwyte to just give the industrial theme. And I'm going to do this on all the models. Like it's such a core recognizable feature of those Greek designs. I wanted it repeated throughout the Mechanicum force, especially as like Mechanicum are sort of like artisans, or like, I mean, they might be like really heavy-handed artisans, but they're the ones that do all the crafting. So I just wanted that as a repeated motif throughout my force. So if there's anything that you can find in historical references or anything like that that you can apply to your heresy force, say it's a Dark Angels force, you could do, especially like Bretonnian transfers immediately spring to mind. I mean, I wish I'd have planned that so I could have a better anecdote. But Bretonnian transfers going onto your Dark Angels, say, or even old heraldry patterns, print them out with your own transfers. It will make your force personally unique, and also there's no real arguing with it, especially with Dark Angels, I suppose. And I suppose Legions are so broad, you could have any motifs you wanted for your campaign badges, things like that. How far campaign badges go across your force is entirely up to you. As each force was different, right? It's the further they are out on the fringes, the more say you have over the look of your own models, until you get all the way out to Black Shield, where they're just doing whatever they want and fuck what the Primarch says. We have the arduous task now of painting all the panel lines black, and that's black because amphoras are black, right? It's, again, that repeated pattern and motif, and I think really sticking to your guns and just really trying to reinforce a theme. Don't go halves on something, don't make compromises into it. I painted the entire force here, but at least paint a squad. If you have an idea that you really want to strongly follow through with, I say go for it and really dive into that theme and see how it turns out after a squad, after you've completely finished a model on every step. Don't be stripping models after like one or two steps into the process. Finish the process that you've started out with. Like, finish the process you've embarked on. Yes, words. Yes, I'm really good at talking. So yeah, because what I find, once you get to the end of a process, what looks absolutely terrible in the middle ends up coming together if you just trust in the process. So, and that's sort of freeing, because you can just relax into it and be like, I don't care what it looks like at every stage. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to get to the end, trust the process, and it will work. And 99 times out of 100, it seems to end up doing. Like, I have complaints about every single force that I do, but that doesn't stop. If I pour my heart and soul into hundreds of hours, which I've done before, of paint jobs of a single model, I despise that model just as much, if not more, than when I do one of these very fast paint jobs where I just trust the process. And I'm not saying they've both not got a place. They're both very useful, and throwing loads into a paint job is very fun to do. But I also wouldn't write yourself off if you don't have time to do that, or just want to enjoy painting again, which is what this has been about for me. And it's actually perked my interest more in those bigger paint jobs. Next, we miss out actually on sponge chipping that I've done on all of the models. And that is because it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I sponge chipped, and I completely forgot to film the process. So I'm sorry about that, but all I did was use lead belcher and a sponge and do the sponge chipping that we all know and love. So next came AK Engine Grime. I don't know, everyone has seen me do this before if you watched any of my other insert clickbait videos. And I'm going to do it over and over again because I really enjoy doing this process. It gives more gradients across the models. The actual engine grime seems to work very well as a base for lots of different colours as the base scheme. The base of the base scheme. It works basically with a lot of your base colours. And it really brings them out. As opposed to a black or like a winter streaking grime, which is a green. I've had it work on purples, blues. Well, whites are especially good. And yeah, it's then going to go into the taking off stage. And this is where I actually fucked up a little bit. So I've been taking the grime off the model with these cotton buds. And one thing that I hadn't counted on, the 3D printer resin actually wasn't as grippy of the paint that I've been using, because no other paints have changed. So it wasn't as grippy of the paint that I've been using. And I actually started rubbing off paint with the cotton bud. Foolishly, I started with the HQs rather than the line troops, because I just, Danger's my middle name, so that's what I did. What I would recommend is, instead of using a cotton bud, use a brush and just heavily brush down the model if you're using a 3D print. If you're using plastics, I don't know, I sometimes wipe up a bit of paint, but that tends to weather over. It just was particularly bad this time on the 3D printer resins. So cotton bud if you're on plastics, and brush if you're on resins. But it's all down to personal choice. I do find the cotton bud is better when it's been soaked a bit and sort of starts coming apart. So I do recommend doing a line trooper and then a HQ and then another, then whenever you replace a new board, doing a line trooper first that you don't care about as much. Now, this is my HQ. We're just going over all the raised bits and just letting the white spirit that's pressed out of the board run down into the recesses. So then you get this gradiented effect that you would get with oil washes and things like that, or oil filters, I should say, because it's across the entire model. And it's just a very easy way of doing it, is applying the oil everywhere, or the enamel everywhere, and then taking it off. So next up we have the most triumphant step of all, and that is the dust spray step. It's a 50-50 mix of Tamiya flat earth and flat flesh, and I can't even take credit for this. I stole it from the original MKA courses that I attended, and yeah, it just gives so much character, and it brings, I feel, the models into the world where they've got this natural dust and dirt all over them. The colour of it is like a nice dried caked on mud in the end, where it's like, do you know, like when mud sticks to you and then like dries, most of it falls off, but you've then got this sheen across you. That's what this is. So being on vehicles, I put this a bit, like all machines of it, all Mechanicum are vehicles really, so they're prone to being stood still for longer, so I put this a bit higher on these Mechanicum than I normally would on troopers, but I didn't put it on elbows and knees where I'd usually spray it lightly onto Marines and Militia Solar, because they're less likely to be lying on the ground to fire their guns. They're just going to be stood up all the time. Also worth saying, it gives a really nice gradient across capes like this Archmagos that I'm just doing. The tabards and like dick pelts. I'm going to run with that word now that me and Miles have solidified on it as the name for a loincloth. And yeah, it's just really good for giving items of clothing a gradient across them. Even if, like, you can put loads of effort into them and it just brings it out a bit more. But if you've just done one flat colour as a base colour on a cloth, it really helps. And I think it goes well with this enamel colour, which is a bit darker. It brightens it back up, but it also hazes out really harsh lines, which don't look natural on models as well. And next we go into a step that I've come to absolutely love. And I don't know whether I should love it, but I do. This is the start of putting a spot colour on, right? Like a light source, an OSL. So I was out of Moot Green, which is my favourite. It's just my favourite colour to do it with. And because I find that Moot Green, it layers really well and smoothly, and that's the Games Workshop airbrush colour. So I ran out to the shop and I was trying out today a new one, which is the Vallejo fluorescent. I've put fluorescent white there, but I'm trying out the Vallejo fluorescent green, and I've got to say I really liked it on the actual, like the overspill onto the model. I thought it was brilliant for that. What I might do in future is use the Moot Green second as another step after the fluorescent green to just like bring that colour together, because it was sort of too flat green in the end. Now, as I say, I did like it. Like, you can see me putting it onto the shoulder pad of this Histaxi in a second, and I really like the overspill effect of it. I do think it needs the white layer down first as well, which the Moot Green from Games Workshop didn't need. But I think that sort of like the opaqueness really lends itself to the overspill effect of OSL, but doesn't to the stark colour that you might need in some, like, say, plasma or power weapon actual blades. So, horses for courses, I suppose, and actually you want both horses because you've got both courses here. So especially in the arms of my Magos, I really like how that effect has come out. And moving on, we can see the horse-mounted, what's it called? Dominus Magos, that I like the overspill effect onto the side of the body from the blade. I think really gives a nice bit of visual interest to the model. So next up we have the base, and this is something that you should really get used to me saying. So I really like dirt bases, and the thing that looks most like dirt is dirt. So what I did is I went out and got some dirt from either the garden or a field nearby your house. Well, I didn't get it from the field nearby your house, but you could do that. So I got it from the field nearby my house. So I picked that out, and I actually get inspiration from a little bit of pot that was just dug up with that dirt. Slam it around like a mortar and pestle style, and we have a very dirt-like looking like substance that I'm going to mix with PVA, and surprisingly, dirt looks the most like dirt. I defy anyone to find something that looks more like dirt than this dirt. Yeah, it's just an unarguable position, I think. So I mix it up with some PVA, and what I want is I want a runny layer, because I want it easy to paint onto the models. So I just slap some in, mix it up, and just sort of go by feel. Like, there's no science to this. It's just go by feel over whether or not you've got it wet enough. And there's no downside if you've not got it wet enough. You just slap some on the model, oh, it's too hard to get out, and then you slap some more in. Along with this, I'm going to be using some Gamer's Grass burnt tufts, and that's because a lot of my models had sort of rad engines and things like that. I wanted the burnt tufts. It wants to fit in with my Iron Warriors army and my Militia Solar, because it's all one greater army that I actually own. It's not lots of individual armies. They all have their place in the force structure of my Iron Warriors. So I wanted like a grassy plain, like a lot of my art, like everyone else is on, but something that's more uniquely Mechanicum. So with that, I applied the dirt PVA mixture, then the burnt tusk, and then when that was completely dried, and that's why it actually took 5 days, was I had to wait for it for a day to dry after putting the tufts on, because I like the extra adhesion of the PVA to the tufts. I had to wait for a day for that to dry. Then I put some rust powder dry brushed onto the dirt just to give it a bit more like unifying colour across the model and the base and things like that. And then like obviously black rimmed it. You have to wait for the enamel to dry for sort of like half an hour, but it still adds up when you're doing a full army all in a batch. So that's why it's ended up at 5 days. Nothing particularly took that long that I was like so incredibly bored by it. It just adds up over time. And with that, you can see me doing the same to Hitachi, because the base Hitachi, God, I can't pronounce this Mechanicum name. The Myrmidon that I'm going to be using. So, yeah, I'm doing that to that as a more normal example of a base, and that's how we left it. So with that, this is the final army, and yeah, it didn't come out exactly perfect, but I'm very happy with the result for 5 days paint or 5 nights painting. I think it's got some nice spot colours that can draw interest on the table from arm's length. It's then got details of the border patterns when you sort of zoom into the model and hold it here in front of your face. And I think that's one thing that's worth saying, actually just saying it then, is models need to be grabbing of attention from arm's length, and then when you get in close, there wants to be something that's revealed as additional interest on the model. And I think it's worth thinking about every time you paint a model. So as we get on to the Archmagos, you can see that from arm's length, you're going to be seeing these rust on the floor, the glowing power weapon, as well as it glowing onto the arms. When you pull it into your face, as well, you can see on the skill axe behind, you're then going to be seeing the transfers that border the cape, and you might notice that that's the Greek pattern. So there's just these little details that start coming out the closer you get to the model. And even though we've done a very fast paint job here, it's still present in the model. So next we're going to go on to the Secretary image, and the image that actually kicked it all off, or one of the images that kicked it all off. This is the inspiration of how I wanted my hoplites, and I'm actually very happy with how they've come out and how I've achieved that. So yeah, as I said, there are things that I changed, things that I go back to, but actually nothing's stopping me from going back to anything that I changed, like the moot green on the fluorescent green before. And as we just scroll through the images, I'm gonna have to do the YouTubey things. I'm really sorry. So if you liked this video and you want more of them, don't forget to hit like, comment below what you liked, what you didn't like. What could I have done differently? What would you have done differently? If you want more painting videos, let me know. I enjoy doing the painting. I'm just a bit sort of unsure of myself putting them together, because this is now only the 3rd painting video. And there is a Patreon link below where you can get yourself a discount to all of these Solwyte miniatures that you see popping up, printed by Laserforge in Cleveland's, as well as ad-free videos, a bounty tray, and access to the Discord. It's all mounting up, and we'll catch you guys next time in a bit.